Okay, it is video making time. This is my third video, and I want to continue on from what I was talking about in my other video, my last one, using the analogy of video games as what we're dealing with in our life, and especially what we're going to be dealing with, and seeing what is going to be thrown at us as increasingly difficult levels that we're going to need to be prepared to deal with. And we prepare to deal with that by researching what's coming up, what's going to be thrown at us, and developing our character so that it can handle that kind of level of difficulty. Because, this isn't a video game. This is real life. So, unfortunately, we don't have, unlimited saves. We can't just load a previous version of the game before we die. We can't redo anything. We got one shot to get this right. If we die, that's it. So, don't be too scared of that, but try to do it right. Try to do it right the first time. And we do have one big advantage over if you've ever played a video game, you kind of just go at it, experiment, make a whole bunch of mistakes, and you learn from them, and eventually you get good enough to pass the level. You go on to the next, and then you repeat the process. We don't have that advantage where we can make all those mistakes because we can't redo anything. But what we can do is research what's coming up. Thoroughly research what's coming up, what's going to be thrown at us, so that when it happens, we're ready for it. We already know what the level is. Maybe not the exact level, maybe not all the details, but we have a general idea of what the next level is going to be and what's going to be thrown at us so that we can properly be prepared for it. We're going to be fully prepared for it. And there's many aspects of that, of what's going to be thrown at us. It's not going to be good. There's a lot of really terrible things that are going to be happening. And I want people to be as prepared as possible to deal with that, to know what's going to happen, and then know what the solution or available solutions are to those problems, and prepare for them as early as possible. Starting today. Ideally starting months ago or years ago. But if not, then at least start today. And the big one, this is, there's Bill Gates and his ridiculous quest for mass vaccination and tracking and all that stuff. But I want to just shift the focus from that. As terrible as that is, that's a huge part of what's going to be coming down on us. But I want to shift the focus onto food. Food is the bigger problem because people are going to wake up to this Bill Gates nightmare. They are waking up. They're going to wake up. That's obvious. If you can't see that trend, it's happening. It's going to go exponential at some point. We're not there yet, but I can clearly see that happening. It has to. It's too insane. Even the most sheep-like people, most of them are going to wake up to this if they really want to try pushing this entire agenda in the next couple of years. But the food, that's how they're going to get us. Because, you can be as awake as you want. You can be ready to rebel. You can speak out. You can do all those awesome things which we need to do. But if you don't have enough food to eat, or you can't afford it, because society's not producing enough of it, well, what do? That's the problem. That's the level that's coming. It's already transitioning. For some people in some countries, it's already there. Because they don't have, massive extra storage of food. They don't have the ability to just print money and throw it at people so they can buy food as they like we're doing with our devaluation of our currencies, just by printing money and not producing anything. So some people are already on that level. We're not yet, but we're transitioning into it. So be ready for that level. And there's three parts to this. I want to focus on three parts. One is that I think is the most obvious for people at this point, and that is the lockdowns that are causing supply chain interruptions that are forcing farmers to dump massive amounts of food, and food, mainly meat packing plants, having to shut down and not be able to process food, which is causing more issues for farmers. Farmers always get screwed from this. Pretty much every plan that the powers that be put in place, it's going to screw farmers, because you screw the farmers and you screw us. And so that's the most obvious. And we see how that's affecting things in grocery stores right now. There's food shortages in most places. It's really hard to get bulk flour. It's hard to get bulk rice. Meat prices are going up. It's hard to get meat. But that's only one aspect of this. The second aspect is the economic collapse, and that hasn't fully hit yet. We're seeing it. This is the biggest economic collapse of our lifetimes, or maybe any lifetime. Unemployment has gone up to something like 30 or 40% in 2 months, and it's not going back. It's definitely not going back. And at the same time, governments are hyperinflating their currency by printing tons of money with nothing really we're not producing much anymore. What's going to happen to the value of our currencies? It's going to go way down. It's not going to be able to produce, to buy anything. And that's going to be, the longer term effects on that are absolutely devastating. Like, the farmers are going to go bankrupt. They already have massive loans they can't repay. So mass bankruptcies. There's going to be issues with getting enough fertilizer from China, paying for all of the massive inputs that farmers currently have to pay for. And then we won't be able to afford it anyway, because we don't have any money. And just because the government prints more money, that doesn't do anything. That's not real wealth. That's just monopoly money. So that's going to really devastate the food supply. On top of it, prices are going to skyrocket, and shortages are going to skyrocket, and there's just not going to be enough food for everybody. People are going to starve, and of course it's going to be poor people who get screwed first. They're already, lineups for most food banks are insane to deal with. You think you have a problem at Walmart right now, just try going to most food banks. But that's not even the worst part of the level that's coming up. That's just one major aspect of it. The third aspect, and I think this one's by far the least known, is a grand solar minimum, a super grand solar minimum climatic cycle that we're already rushing into, head first. We're here, and what that is doing is causing extreme weather patterns that make it very difficult to grow food the way that we're used to. Monocropping, tons of fertilizers and inputs, just growing everything in terrible soils, growing it, in northern Canada, like in the prairie provinces and a lot of the Midwest in the U.S. A lot of that food, farmers just aren't going to be able to grow the way they have been. And food production is going to completely be devastated. Completely devastated. This is a multi-millennial cycle. And, just like everything, it's always blamed on something else. It's apparently because of CO2 and cows farting, but anyone who has any discernment whatsoever can tell that that's not, there is no global warming. That's all a joke. It's increasingly extreme weather events because of the solar cycle that we're moving into. And that's not just going to last for a couple of years. That's going to last for a couple decades. And we're just barely experiencing the ramifications of that. It's going to get way worse, way more extreme, way more ridiculous. It'll all be blamed on cow farts. All of it will. And as people are starving to death, it's because we produce too much CO2. But that's going to cause so much starvation and desperation in people. And those three things are now happening simultaneously. You know, even before this pandemic, this scamdemic, this was still going to be a huge problem. We were still going to all, like, there's going to be mass starvation even without that. I haven't even computed and figured out exactly how much worse it's going to be now that the government is locking everything down and forcing the food supply to collapse artificially. I wasn't prepared for that, but it's going to be even worse. So that's the level that we're dealing with. That's a future level, and it's coming up, and your character needs to be ready for it. Your character needs to be ready for it. Otherwise, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when your kids are starving and your only choice is to let them starve or take the vaccine, take the microchip? What are you going to do? Have you thought that through? And do you have solutions to avoid needing to make that choice? Have you implemented those solutions? Do you know what those solutions are? Are you going to implement them? That's what you need to figure out now. For some people, it's going to be much harder than others. You know, if you're living in a rural, sustainable community, you have a lot more options, and this isn't going to hit you as hard. If you're living in a major city, in an apartment building, you definitely have, this is going to be harder. I can't say what everyone's choices are. I can't say exactly what to do, but I will point out a few things that I would do if it is possible to do so at all for you. Number one, stockpile food. I've been saying it for years. Stockpile food that does not go bad easily, that lasts for years, and it's at least nutritious enough to get you alive. The big four for me is rice, beans, lentils, and some kind of oil that is ideally not garbage vegetable oil. So ghee can last, 1 or 2 years. Olive oil in a can can last several years. Coconut oil, if it's extra virgin, I think much longer than a few years. Just those foods, they're all insanely cheap, way cheaper than the amount of money you're spending now. And stockpile as much as you can. It's going to be a good investment. It's going to be worth a lot more than any money that you have in the bank. That's for sure. Food's going to go up in value more than pretty much anything you could possibly own. Second is start growing food. I don't know what your situation is, but try to grow as much food as you possibly can. If you live out in a rural area, it's much easier. Learn about permaculture, learn about sustainable growing methods, grow as much food as you possibly can. Ideally, grow more than you need for yourself and your family. Third part is learn as many real skills as you can, things that are going to actually get you by in this, especially with growing food, but really with anything for self-sufficiency or a skill that someone else is going to want through this to trade you for food. If you don't have that, you don't have any value to trade anyone. Why would they trade you value if you don't have anything? Knowing about gender studies, if you took an undergrad in that, that's not going to help. Pretty much no university degree or knowledge is going to help at all. That's all useless information. The last one is, if you don't already live in a rural area, figure out a way, at least as a backup plan, to live in a rural area. If you know family or friends that would be willing for you to move in. Finding other like-minded people, like build a commune, build a tiny house commune, go all in on a house together. The level that is coming up is so crazy, so insane, and so difficult that those solutions which are extreme in themselves are really the only reasonable solutions that you can be taking to deal with this level. If I was living in a city, I would be thinking of every possible way to get out. I would not want to be living in a city. And if I was going to be staying in a city, I would be finding connections, really finding connections to do something to survive all this, to survive this level that's coming. It's going to be bad. There's no sugarcoating it. It's better to be a little scared now and allow that fear to motivate you to do something, actually take action and implement solutions, than to be scared later when you can no longer implement those solutions because it's too late. When everybody already is starving, when there already isn't food available. It's better to be scared, a little scared now than a lot more scared and desperate later. So figure this out. There are solutions. Just research them. Do whatever you can. Make more connections. Ask people who already know what's going on. Ask them questions about how to deal with this. There are solutions. This is character development. Figure it out. Improve your character so that you can deal with this level coming up. The level we're on is nothing compared to what we're going to be dealing with. I know that sounds a little depressing. Sorry, it had to be said. But I really hope people take something out of this, and I really hope that it spurs people into action instead of just kind of living in fear about it, and seeing it all as inevitable, like they can't do anything. There's lots you can do, so do it. That's all for now.